Hey, everybody. How are you doing tonight? It's been 2 weeks and a lot has been happening. But 2 weeks ago, the team, and I, we decided that tonight we want to talk about white supremacy. Now, that covers a whole lot of ground, but tonight that's what we're going to focus on is white supremacy. And I just want you to remember we're just five friends, and tonight I think there's four of us. It might be a fifth one later, but we're just five friends that come together every other week to talk about the issues that are relevant to Black folks in America. And that's key because we've got an election coming up November 8th. And what is the ask? I ask that all the time. What is the ask? You're voting. You can't vote just to be voting. You've got to vote with a reason and a rationale in mind as to what your vote means to Black folks in America. So I'm going to bring on the rest of the panel, and we're going to talk a little bit. They're going to introduce themselves. And by the way, I'm Jeanette Bradley, reigning here from Tampa, and Mona.
Mona Judge, also from Tampa.
Albert Fields from Atlanta proper.
Alton Drew from the West End of Atlanta.
So you're going to have the views coming out of Tampa and Atlanta, and I can't think of a better pool of people. And these are friends of mine, folks, that have very differing opinions. We don't always agree on everything. But I think that's what's important, that we learn as Black people how to dialogue and have these hard conversations. So last week, Albert, you said, hey, let's talk about white supremacy. Where does that come from? What are we talking about?
Well, I think we were talking about politics in the election, and my observation was, as long as they continue to decide who's going to run, they don't have to worry about who's going to win because they'll always win. And that's when I said that's the concept of white supremacy. As long as they can choose the game, as long as they can choose the rules, as long as they can run the event, then no matter what we do, then we wind up in the middle of white supremacy. Now, what is white supremacy? Dr. Neely Fuller, who was a teacher, I guess, of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, who has a book out called The ISIS Papers, which has a pretty good definitive definition in it. But he said it very clearly. He said, if you don't understand white supremacy, then everything that you do understand will only confuse you. He said that's how complex it is because it covers education, it covers religion,
Absolutely.
it covers politics, it covers finances, it covers military. Every day that you wake up, from the time it covers the media,
Education.
the whole nine, especially education.
Yes.
For instance, you had a pyramid up. You sent us a pyramid, and one of the things I noted about that pyramid when you set it up was how they define. See, once again, as long as they can define what racism is and white supremacy, then they can always control your thinking. So they have you believing that because somebody calls you nigger or because they can some kind of way discriminate against one person on a job, then somehow that's racism, But using that word, the N word, has no value. It doesn't hurt us unless they can back it up with the military, with the judicial system, with the police. They've got all those forces. When we started thinking about this show, I was reminded right after I got out of high school, I was going into a hospital in my little town in Tennessee. And a little boy came out of there, a little white boy came out about 4 or 5 and said to his daddy, there's a nigger. I couldn't say anything back to him.
I'm sorry.
I'm telling you, this is the way life is in America for us every day. The power is not in that word. It is the force behind that word. And that's where white supremacy comes in. Okay. And how it will control your thinking. For instance, let's bring it back to politics. You got two choices when you have a vote. You either vote Republican or you vote Democrat. They choose who those people are. I'm going to remind you of the 2020, what was that? The 2020 election where Biden was about to be eliminated.
Yes.
He goes to South Carolina with a note attached to him that said, if he doesn't do well in South Carolina, if he finishes anything less than first, he's out of the race. And all of the Democratic bigwigs got together to ensure that the other candidates that were a lot more successful than he was would not be successful in that race. And that particular race turned the whole election around. And people will say, oh, that's just a liberal vote. No, that was the white supremacy saying, oh, these other candidates are too far outside of our limits. They're too far outside of the kind of people that we want to have in office. So that's the problem that you got there is they chose Biden. We didn't choose Biden. Okay. The Democratic upper echelon, let's say the 1%ers, they chose, you didn't choose Biden. You think you did. Even when you voted for
Senator
Biden over Trump. Yeah. You didn't even choose him. You said, God, anybody but Trump. So you weren't really choosing him. You were playing the game called white supremacy. I'm gonna give you two choices: strychnine.
It's
I'm
a
gonna give
game.
you strychnine and rat poison, and you pick out whichever one you want.
All right,
Okay?
Moon, you want to get in there because he's saying a lot, and the fact that we're in a game of white supremacy, that's new.
Sydney, can you put that triangle up, by the way?
All right, so
and I agree with them. I agree with them 100%.
Take them away. And so you're saying white supremacists are everywhere, regardless of party.
Yes.
And that's where our battle is in terms of our issues and what we need. It's not against Democrat or Republican. It is against white supremacy, which actually is on.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it on the just for a second on the international level, the global level, if you will. And I'd even go out and say on the metaphysical level. I mean, just 24 hours ago, they buried somebody over in London. I think they call Elizabeth Mary Alice Windsor. Okay. And she, now, as a side note, I lived in a British colony. I never saw a white person in the late 60s on the island of St. Kitts and definitely on the island of Nevis when I go visit my grandfather. I go see my great aunt in St. Kitts. I lived there. Never saw a white person except on that EC dollar bill. And there is
Queen.
Mary Elizabeth Windsor, whatever her name was, the Queen.
Yeah.
Now, going to your point, Jeanette, I think there's the political mechanics. Yo, Clyburn, you're gonna be our boy, and I've had it done to me on a much lower level, with a consumer complaint against somebody and say, Alton, you know, we need your color in there to blah blah blah. So yeah, that's done. But yes, and I admit I always hesitate with white supremacy because I automatically ask what makes them superior. I refuse to use it, but I understand more now what is meant when it's used. But I'm just disclosing my overall discomfort with it because I don't think they're superior to anybody. But the reality is there is in place a system of dominance that has played more on the minds of everyone else than just the mechanics. The question that has to be asked is why? I mean, I'm a trekker, so forgive me. Why was it that we didn't have hand phasers when the Portuguese showed up? Why weren't they zapped out of existence when they showed up? And I think, yes, we can discuss their dominance. Yes, they have dominance definitely in finance. They have dominance socially. They have dominance with capital. Yes. But we have to also ask the accountability question. Why? You know, why can't we counter them? Why do we opt for trying to appease, or worse yet, get on board and try to be chocolate covered crackers? That to me is the annoying question that I hope I can get an answer to before I leave this planet.
Yeah, I think
because that aids this white dominance. You know, because like my dad used to say, somebody's gonna call your bluff, and their bluff has not yet been called. And I would like to think that a lot of it is on their part. Yes, that you have the hardcore mechanics, but there's a lot of delusion. Why can't we see past that? One reason I believe why we can't see past that, it has a lot to do with religiosity, and anything that seems to be dominant in any space, we're ready to, you know, oh yes, that must be wonderful. That is it right there. Because let's look at something real basic.
Yeah.
We had these African gods before we left the continent. But you go to any church, and right before after the second song the choir sings, and before the pastor gets on, we're, you know, going through our chants and stuff, and oh Lord, thank you for bringing us over. Oh, well, what happened to the other gods that you were worshiping? When they in vogue? When did they stop being in vogue? Oh, when you got on his, oh, look at the big ships. Oh, he must be something special. He got guns.
Yeah.
I think there's something going on with there's this disconnect, and
it is psychological. I agree with you. It is psychological, but it's generational psychological beat down of Black people. When we got here, and y'all saw Roots. Come on. I remember Roots when I was very young. I guess I was still in high school. And when they stripped him and beat him and made him say his name was Toby rather than Kunta Kinte, I believe we fought to hold on to those belief systems and ways of knowing that we had, and they beat it out of us. And then that was what, 245 years of slavery that forced a people to readapt to a way that left a lot of that behind, except maybe in our inner beings where we could know, but we don't know because we're too busy trying to chase the white dream. But I think that it was systematically beaten out of us, where they knew divide and conquer was the way to go. And it kind of gets to your question of why don't we come together and we're able to whatever it was, zap them and change this. It's difficult for us Black folks, especially those tied to slavery in the U.S., because I know there's slavery elsewhere, but in the U.S. it was particularly malicious. It was a way to really beat down Black Africans so that we could not come together and overtake. That's what I'm saying. So today, generations later, we have an opportunity here, 13% of the population versus what 60, 70% of the population. I'm just talking Black, white now. If we came together, and they know we're not, and I hate to say that, but they know we're not, we could wag the dog the way the right is wagging the dog. But generations of that oppression has really, really put a real psychological, beating on us.
Jeanette, let me add this piece to you. When you said you're only going to count the whites, so here was a trick. After they realized that they were getting to be outnumbered by Black folks, here's what they did. They gave Italians honorary white cards. They gave the Irish honorary white cards. They gave the Jewish people. A lot of them got honorary white cards. And the latest crew getting it are the Hispanics and the Asians, if you will. And then the lighter they get, they get the honorary card. So when they gave you, because let's face it, if you walked up on these shores and saw the kind of treatment, the brutality that we faced as Black folks, and then somebody turned around to you and said, okay, now, what do you want to be? You want to be them or you want to be us? What are they going to do?
I'll take a white card.
Yeah, you're gonna say, look, give me my white card. Can you laminate it for me, okay? So that I can show this thing everywhere I go. And by the way, let's not limit what white supremacy does, because it's global. You can go to any African country. In fact, the idea of the African countries was actually devised by white folks. They carved up Africa because it was not carved up that way.
They did
until they came in and actually broke it up and said, France, you can have this block. England, you can have this block. Belgium, you can have this block right here.
Colonized everywhere.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm going to say they are the super virus. That's what makes them a supreme, because that virus, you can't stop that sucker. It just spreads all over. And once I get you into 2 generations or 3 generations, a lot of us forget where we come from.
There you go.
Sure.
See?
Sure.
There you go.
Here's the problem we're fighting today. LGBT, we're fighting for them. Women's rights, we're fighting for them. Diversity, I came through that era where we were doing diversity training. We were doing inclusion. We were talking about neutral. See, now my daughter and her group, they're talking about no sexual. They don't want to be called male. They don't want to be called female. They got 50 different flavors of names they want to call themselves rather than male, female. So they're trying to break down that. And then you bring up stuff like intersectionality. See, all of that is under the guise of white supremacy, because every time a new concept came up, from diversity to today with the LGBT, it was always on the heels of Black folks getting ready to come back and ask for reparations, get back and ask for equality and all that. Now, that's the history of it. And if you don't understand that, that's why I said, if you don't understand white supremacy, you'll be confused. And next thing you know, you running around jumping up and down hollering women's rights as a Black woman, not understanding that women's rights was a white woman's thing. And they wouldn't even let Ida B. Wells, one of my heroes, Ida B. Wells was not allowed to march in the women's parade where she was supposed to march. They told her to go sit at the back of the bus on that parade, and she forced her way up to the front.
Yeah.
See, so all of these feminisms and all these other isms that are now coming on the heels of blackness are doing that to distract us from using our power for who we are.
Yeah. So Martha Jackson is saying good dialogue, and she kind of is reiterating what you were talking about, Albert, the game. It is a game, and we need to figure out how to play and play real fast, because, and I'm going to say this, y'all, don't attack me. Democracy is under attack. And the reason why democracy is under attack.
I won't come after you.
Y'all, wait, let me
I
finish.
know. I said I won't.
Y'all are gaining too much ground. And you guys have gotten way too educated, more so than the Hispanic and the Hispanics, that you are going to take positions of power in a democracy, and they're not ready for that, and they're not having it. So they are actually fighting for autocracy, theocracy, whatever you want to call it, to make sure that even in your small numbers, 13% of the population, you can ascend to roles that run this country. Because we are, especially Black women, some of the most educated people in America, especially those immigrants that have come in from Nigeria, what have you.
But they're not worried about democracy being under attack, because at a minimum, half of them will say, well, we never had a democracy in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
we
agree with that?
As a matter of fact, if at least in theory, if you played what the U.S. actually has, which is a republic, if you played it right with a 13% population, oh yeah, you're not going to impact the entire country, but that should never be the end game. You're going to impact the most important, you're going to impact the areas that you choose. You could, under republic, if you want to be rural, if you want to represent that constituency, oh yeah, you can say, well, yeah, y'all got I'll back up a minute. This is the Republican plan right now. And it's winning. And here's the plan. They're saying y'all can have the cities.
Yeah.
Democrats, y'all can have it because, one, we don't want to live there. Two, there really isn't any power there. And there's no power there. And three, the real wealth is in the countryside anyway. In the rural area is where we feed you people. See, so that's a lot of and Democrats.
The way we vote for senators. The way we vote for senators. If Wyoming has 2 and California has 2 representing, come on, y'all. That doesn't make any sense. And
that's about as much democracy as you're going to get. Or else we'd rather go back to 25th Amendment or whatever, when you didn't even have alleged direct vote of the Senate. Me personally, if the complexion of the country was different, I'd go with that too, because I don't care for democracy. That's how you're supposed to run it. But because of this phony narrative of democracy, this is why you have direct elections of senators and I guess congressmen and what have you. But in a true power game, you wouldn't even have that. However, to take another step back, there is no democracy in America. There was never meant to be a democracy in America. So they'll say, well, Jeanette, if you think we're attacking it, that's okay. We'll leave you up to that delusion, because that's one less fight that we actually have to put on. We don't want a democracy, and we don't have one. They will push back against attempts to create one. And
let me add a word. Let me add a word. Let me throw this in. Electoral college. Do you know why that was put in place?
Yeah, because we don't want a democracy.
We didn't want a democracy. No, hold on. And for the point of clarity, I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna say we, because I had nothing to do with that. Yeah. I wouldn't even count it as a citizen. Okay.
Yeah. The we is us right here. Yeah. We got it.
What you mean, we, white man?
Right. What are you talking about? I'm saying If you go back and look at what they planned, they came out with all this, let's vote for this. But in reality, the first thing they came out with, they wanted to make George king because they came out of an environment that they knew. And George said, well, let's not call it king. Let's call it something else so I can hide what we're going to do.
Right.
And so then they put together the whole process of that good document. They had some of the best creative writers. They all could write fiction right now and be millionaires, okay, with the way they were writing that document.
The Constitution pretty much says all men are created equal. And something I was listening to earlier today, one of Woodrow Wilson's descendants wrote a book and pretty much said that didn't necessarily mean that we are all created equal.
That's correct.
It meant more so that there will be no ruling class.
Okay,
there will be no one family that rules over everyone else, that we are equal. 55
men signed that contract. And when they said we are all created equal, they meant those 55 men that signed that document. Because they're the ones that parsed out the land. They're the ones that had first choose over the best property. They're the ones that had a chance to send policemen in to maintain their own. Get a book called White Trash. White Trash gives you the whole, you have, okay. That gives you the whole history of how they rigged that to guarantee that those 55 men were actually addressed in that Constitution. See, they use the phrase, and that's a legal term called what is a citizen. You need to go look up the definition of a citizen, because most people in America were not considered citizens. They were indentured servants. They were slaves. They were cattle. They were property, but they were not citizens. That was a whole definition centered around that. So they didn't include us. They still don't include us. And we're still fighting for something that does not exist, as Alton said. Most people don't want it. All they want to do is win. The Democrats want to win. The Republicans want to win. And the question is, when do black folks start saying they want to win?
I want democracy. And I'm saying,
what does that mean? What does that mean?
I want a democracy that pays attention to the Reconstruction era as the beginning point where we started making laws and amendments, what have you, that was more inclusive of everyone else, not the original Constitution per se, but and I think that's where white supremacy, or white people in general, really began fighting to say, we don't want that democracy, as you say. We don't, if it's extended to everybody, we don't want that. And they've been fighting ever since. I want that. We're all, go ahead.
They put, going back to Albert's point, they put out the Madison Avenue marketing scheme about democracy, but they never meant it. The other thing that they were going after was, well, George, you guys were supposed to have a true parliamentarian setup where 3 main classes are represented, and it's failed. So we're going to take a crack at it. But they never meant equality. Okay, look at the construct of the Congress, for example. You know, they want to go with that upper house and lower house deal. Once you go with that kind of bifurcated representation, you don't care about democracy. You're not aiming for democracy. What democracy is to them is, like my professor Charles Billings, may he rest in peace. It's about keeping the barbarians at the gate quiet. Democracy is a doggy bone. So it's a doggy bone. It's like they start out, the aristocrats. We're shelling out the land. If you go to your land title books in the courthouse, the very first issue of property is the United States government, as if they existed from Eve. So that was their outlook. Yeah, we distribute the land, and oh yeah, you help me out in this election or whatever. We're gonna give you some. Well, you're a knight without the name knight. That's what it was. But then you got agitation because you got people coming over into this brand new country. You got further agitation in the 1800s. So what do? You got to give them a little something, something to quiet them down. That's where democracy comes in. Democracy are enough handouts to keep the barbarians quiet. But we're at a point now where there've been too many handouts, and it's becoming very expensive when you've got an economy where your debt is 150% of what your GDP is. And I look around, I go into coffee shops, and I see a bunch of young people pushing 60. I can say young people, a bunch of young people sitting around on laptops doing nothing but sending each other emails. Why do I bring that up? Because this country's at a point, and it's been at this point now for 40 years, where it doesn't produce anything. So this country is now living on vapor. And the more vapor it runs on, and the more labor is exchanged out to go home and do nothing, you got to hand out more gifts. That's what Build Back Better is about. That's what the Inflation Reduction Act is about. That's what Medicare was about. That stuff came up in the mid-60s. It wasn't because JFK was, oh, you know, my father, I saw what he's going through, and I know most Americans can't afford this. So Lyndon, before the next election in 64, let's do something. That's what that was. It wasn't about him, you know, being nice. It was a payoff. Oh, 1965. Now Lyndon's like, oh my God, Jack's dead. It's 1965. We got to replace a whole lot of labor. We got the 64 Act, the 65 Act. Let's let some of them niggers in from the Caribbean and Africa, the Naturalization Act. It's all a gimme. That's what democracy is. The more people you bring in, this and then close it. The DEI people, all these what they call it, what they call equity, and what's the first part? What's the first? The D and the DEI. What do they call that?
I'm not sure what that is.
Equality, inclusion, and whatever.
Okay.
This thing about representation that the woke crowd is falling into. If you're out there listening, if you're a DEI person, I'm the vice president of DEI. You're being used. You've been hoodwinked.
But see, that's more work.
Let me.
Yeah, but you see that. I gotta hear from Mona. I know I'm being bad. I'm sorry.
Hear from Mona, Mona,
yeah, let me hear from Mona.
Yeah, okay. Girl, Mona got a thought.
Hey. No, I'm really all over the place with this. So I'm gonna go back to I'm liking everything Elton, Albert, and you were saying, and all I'm thinking about is how Black people, how can we come together, and what can we do for those who do not want to come together? I'm almost like Harriet Tubman, but
shoot 'em.
We just got to kill them. We just got to kill them. It's our allies, and we have a hand in how America is today. We ourselves still continue, because if we would pull back from the Democratic Party, who say they're our allies, okay, and they're the biggest white supremacists.
Yes,
it is just no joke. We know who the Republican Party is, but it's our DC, and it's the feminists. I tell ladies who come to the shop and, you know, they want to be in the movement. I tell my daughter, I say, honey, listen, Black women have always worked. We didn't have the feminists. That's not our issue. Oh, Ma, I said, no. We have to understand, we fight, they get what they want, and we left with shit. Yeah. We still left at the bottom. The diversity, who benefit from that? White women's.
That's right.
They always figure out a way, and it's white, mostly Democrat women's.
Yes.
So
here's a meme. Here's a meme I saw that brought it all home for me. America gave the Ukrainians $8 billion.
Yes.
They gave Israel $3 billion. They gave one other country $1.3 billion, And then when it came to Jackson, Mississippi,
Mississippi.
they
Yes.
said just stop drinking the water.
Yeah.
Now
that's
Jackson,
right.
Mississippi is primarily a black town.
Yes.
And so once again, my buddy always said, well, some white people got caught up in that, but I tell him all the time, sometimes the dolphins get caught up in the tuna nets when they're out there because they swim with the tuna sometimes. See, so just because them onesies and twosies get caught, that doesn't mean they change their game. They just willing to take that as collateral damage. And so everybody else got all that money. Tell me, I was just going to say, Mona, tell me why they have not sent the troops in, the environmental people into Jackson, Mississippi right now to clean that stuff up, and why the governor of Mississippi made a joke and laughed about the Negroes down there with no water.
But what about our black politician? I was looking at I was on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, and I see Sheila Jackson over in
Oh my God.
Israel. I was like, what, lady, what are you doing? And our people are suffering right here in America. And I get livid every time I see what he's sending to Ukraine. Now, I'm not saying I'm not sensitive about those people, but I don't have any more sympathy that I can afford to give to anybody but our people.
You're describing white supremacy. That's all you're doing. You're describing white supremacy.
Well,
it says take care of your own. It says take care of your own first, and all these other non-white people be damned. And we happen to be non-white people. If those, even if you got $1 billion as a black person, you still end up being a non-white person in the end, and you still get used by the white supremacists.
Well, then one ask we need to explore is we acknowledge that we are not a part of this system. Okay, we get the message, so it's time to change the relationship. Because and that was the diversity. Instead of pushing all this diversity, equity, inclusion, which is like watching, a needle trying to go into a balloon or something. You're trying to penetrate their stuff. You say, no, we're here. We have citizenship. That's a legal weapon we've got. But we're going to change the relationship a bit. Instead of Alton going to Congress, Alton is he's a counselor general. He's an ambassador. He's not here to help you write your laws. He's here to say, okay, we have a trade relationship, and I'm here to negotiate with you how much of yours is mine and how much of mine is mine. That's right. The relationship has to change. Right. We need to go back to the days, and I'll forgive my FSU throwback, Jeanette will appreciate it. We need to go back to the days of Elijah Smiley. Okay. Mm-hmm. He was a student, he was a BSU president, and he left undergrad about a year or so before I did. But the man was legend. And he was a legend for that very saying. What's yours is mine. And what's mine is mine. This guy actually took the student meeting room, student senate room, and locked it up. He said, none of y'all leave until I get what I want. We've lost that toughness, and we're going to need that. We're going to need that in order to change this tangential relationship has to change. And to me, that's one thing that we have to work on, because what I'm hearing tonight is what I've been hearing really all week since Liza Bug got buried or died. Is that and another quick side note, I never bought into the Black Twitter thing until she passed. Yeah. And Black Twitter went insane. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. I was like, this is great. Let me jump in here. I was like, not to boast, I've never got so many retweets and likes in my life. All you do is say one thing. I'm just like, yes. Black Twitter is real. Black Twitter is real.
Is real.
But where I'm going with that is the energy is out there, but it's time to rechannel it. And it begins with changing our relationship with this. It
Yeah, but
has.
that's the question.
Well,
And I think Mona kind
Well,
of
to me, Tony,
that's
yeah.
the question. How do we come together and change it?
Now, Tony Brown talked years ago. He had a show that came on Sunday, and one of his thoughts, I thought he had one of the best thoughts. He said, "Here's how you understand real power. If the white folks own the electricity company and we own the water company, then that's real power.
Yes.
If they own the gas company, then we own another one. Now we got power, because if they refuse to give us electricity, what do? We refuse to give them water. That's called a point of negotiation right there.
So,
And until what I'm getting to is, we've got to understand how we come into real power and not positions.
how do we do that?
Get into real power and not positions. We got to get rid of the idea of having a face on it instead of putting some real serious pace on it.
Yeah,
to where people are doing things.
Agreed.
Okay. And then you're saying to yourself, well, how do we get that far?
Yeah.
We start thinking it's the same way the Irish came to America and said, we can't do a lot, but what we're going to do is we're going to control all of the police.
Yes.
You see, that's why they play the bagpipes. That's why they play all them bagpipes when the police die and all that kind of stuff. It's got to do with them coming in to say. And matter of fact, when my son get old enough, I'm giving him a job in the police. When my great grandson get old enough, I'm gonna make him a police. And so you got generations of them that came in and said, we're gonna control that. What are the Pakistani people doing now? You go into 7-Eleven and see if you can find somebody else other than them in 7-Eleven now passing out them little cigars to folks now. They decided we're going to control this part of the market. And control is where, if you're looking for some power, control is where you develop that power by saying, we're going to take over this market right here, and you're going to have to come deal with me. Okay? So every time you go up $5 on your funky bread, then I'm gonna go up $5 on my cigars. Okay, and see how you like that, since you like cigars so much. I mean, that's our thinking that I'm saying that we need to get into.
Yeah, but our thinking, back to our thinking, has been the result of 245, another 100 years under Jim Crow. Our thinking has been, how do I be as much like the oppressor as possible? We have really tried to perfect that to such an extent that it's hard for us to figure out what that power thing needs to be so that we can play the game, get in the game, as you said, Martha also said. How do we get in the game when we have spent all of this time generationally trying very hard to be them?
How do you stop being an alcoholic? If you recognize and you just describe yourself as addicted to a crazy system that does not have your interest, so now you are an addict at that particular point. How do you get off of being an addict? First of all, you got to be conscious and you got to be aware of it, and then you got to make an external effort to say, I'm no longer going to be an addict. I'm no longer going to drink that wine that makes me go crazy. I'm no longer going to smoke that stuff that makes me go crazy. That's the same way with politics and power.
Well, I'm glad you used that word, really, because when Jeanette's last statement and yours, Albert, and especially when you're talking about controlling a piece of a market and changing mindsets. One market, and I've been in that market for 10 years, the political industry. Politics is an industry. Where was the mistake that Black leaders made? Going back to Albert's point, and I think Jeanette made it too, we tried to be like them. No, you can't go in there saying, oh, because I would hear from my classmates in law school, yeah, Alton, if you get inside that system, blah, blah. I said, no, if you get in there, you get co-opted. It's over. You can't get in. You can't put on that camouflage and then think that, no, that's not going to work. You have to go in there, or you have to engage it with the attitude of, okay, I'm here to ask or to negotiate on behalf of XYZ constituents. Well, Alton, well, we can meet you halfway, but if you give us no. What you're giving me means I'm being co-opted. So the leadership, their mindset has to change first, and their mindset is not going to change. Any leadership in the political industry over the age of 25, in my opinion, they already lost. You're going to need new blood. But yes, from a bigger picture, you need to control something so that when they come at you saying, "Oh well, we're not going to do X," to Albert's point, well, we're not going to do Y. Even if something simple as, well, we can offer you X, Y, Z in this election in Tampa. Is that right? Well, we need a down payment, and we don't get it by a certain time, we're not going to show up. We need to be talking in those terms. But we're not coming here to look like you.
Yeah, I agree with you. But go ahead, Mom.
Just quickly, Elton said 25. I was just going to say that we got to get rid of the baby boomers and we might have a chance. But gee, 25?
Because the baby boomers are passing down the nonsense to the 25-year-olds. They're already being trained in this mindset from the time. Student government. There's this run brother, Robert Jackson. I don't know where he is now, but I was a freshman at FAM. He was a senior at FAM. He was a student body president. Robert Jackson was being groomed. They get groomed from jump. And I've heard about Howard University. You go to Howard, you're going there for the grooming. So they're catching you from 18.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So here's some more history. I see the history points our way. I had a chance to see Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, before he died. He came to the college where I was working, and he did a whole presentation. And he said one of the things about the 60s that they're not going to let happen anymore is they're not going to let all of the black thinkers get together in one location the way they were able to do at Morehouse, the way they were able to do at Howard. And that's why you started seeing a lot of these white colleges giving away a lot of money to our white students. Because if you could isolate our talented ones, then you can convince them that they are somehow special and individual. And he made that point, and I went like, man, that is a great way of thinking. He said, but that would never happen again, because he named all of the instigators at Morehouse that was around Martin Luther King, where they used to sit around and talk about the ideas. At Howard, they used to talk about the ideas. And he said they can't afford that to happen. So you're going to see, and you see it now, integration was more for them and their security.
Yeah,
we thought they were doing us a favor when in reality, in reality they was breaking up. They was breaking up the diamond. You hear me?
Yes. They gave us that whitewashed education and kept us in line and made us want to be them. Come on,
Brown. If you read Brown v. Board,
oh my God,
I hadn't read that in years, right? So I went for some reason, I went and read it again. I was like, oh my God.
Right.
They're basically saying we can't afford to have Palestine next to Israel.
That's right.
If you read it's like, because the justices said, well, we really don't know why we're here, because in a few years, these guys, they're already in a lot of instances already have equality in education. They may surpass us. So what do? Hey, let's integrate. Yeah, let's see.
The biggest lie ever told.
So there's a lot of evidence of surpassing, and most of it are sports anecdotes, what have you, in terms of, Richard Williams and Venus and Serena just, going through that white system and taking it over to where they changed the game. We get in and we change the game, and they see this, they know this. So integration, like you said, Albert, was the key that also destroyed our businesses.
Right. That was by design.
It took us down in so many different ways, and like you said, we thought we had something.
See, Richard Williams, the movie was mislabeled with King Richard. That made it sound like it was going to be bad from the beginning. Psychologically, they were already turning you off. But the key to Serena and Venus was a man who had never played tennis a day in his life, but he was able to teach his children. See, now let me fast backwards to you. That's the same thing when black folk came out of slavery. We started developing our own schools, and then the Quakers out of the North came down and saw this, and they went, whoa, home slice. You can't be teaching your folks what you need to teach them to be successful. We'll tell you what you need to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And what they started doing was a version of, let me get you back to farming as fast as I can. So I'm going to teach you some agriculture. I'm going to teach you this, but I'm not going to teach you the reading, the writing, the passing along generational wealth, and all of that kind of stuff. And that was what broke up all of the black schools right out of slavery because of the way they did. And that's what you see happening. And Richard Williams said, no, you're not going to mess with my children. I'm going to monitor what they do. I'm going to show them how to be successful. And then after I teach them, it's just like planting a tree. After a tree gets so big, all you got to do is water it. It'll grow on its own. And he wanted to get them to the point where they are self-sufficient enough that they could do their own. And that's what we've got to back up and do, and go back into these educational systems and start saying.
The model is there. The model is there.
Yeah. Come on. A rich kid has a different education than a poor kid.
Yeah.
A rich kid doesn't need the same types of education that a poor kid does.
Right.
And so therefore you can't have a one size fit all in the educational system for all of these kids, because a kid coming out of the projects has some different needs that a rich kid doesn't. And so we got to start looking at those educational systems and looking at how we can reevaluate and be able to call it out. Right now, we're in a white supremacist system that teaches us the only way we can be successful is to be like them.
And it has, and here's the beauty of what white supremacy has done for them. It has taken any of the talents or the innovations or anything that we've done that's great and have contributed to this society, and they quietly moved it off to the side. And we don't know the half of the great things that we have done. And that is white supremacy. They did that on purpose. We're not learning.
It
ain't just Venus and Serena.
Right.
We had a lot of Venus and Serena situations throughout history that we don't even know about.
So here's a theory for you. And I want you to think about this. The reason that we have so many junkies in the black community, the reason that we have so many alcoholics in the black community is because of what you just said. That we look at, and all we can do is look at what they call success, and we say in every turn, they're slowly killing us with different ways of keeping us back from being who we are. And therefore, we finally, a lot of us try, but we just give up and say, okay, it's better for me to go sit in a gutter somewhere and drink myself to death because I can't do it.
Yeah.
There was a black actor in the 20s, 30s who had done Shakespeare, who had gone to Harvard and all that kind of stuff, but they would only let him do minstrel shows. And he finally died of alcoholism because he went kind of crazy, saying, I got all this education, I got all this ability, and all you're going to let me do is play this stupid stepping, fetching, Uncle Tom scratching up across your head kind of thing. So until we all understand that white racism is not name calling, it's not even wearing them sheets. They don't count for jack doodoo. If you can understand that they control you through the politics, they control you through the military, they control you through the monetary system, they control you especially again through the religion, and they control you every day you wake up. I'm going to pump something at you in the morning. Good morning, America. From that point on, all day long.
To your point, they control us through Ariel, the little animated mermaid.
Right. Yeah. We arguing over
stupid cartoons.
Yeah, you think I'm not even gonna address that. I just look at it and keep going.
I was like, what the hell are they talking about?
Right. Do I care that you painted a white doll with brown paint and called her a black person? No, because I know that's a distraction from what we are about. But that is white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
See, think about it. I am going to create a problem for you where a problem did not exist by throwing. But see, I throw it in at the right time. Just when something else we get ready. See, they're talking about getting the money back from the queen that she stole. They're talking about more reparations and all that. So what do? You throw in the middle of that some discord so that we get distracted and we go running after that carrot.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
That's
pretty
white
good.
supremacy.
Yeah, pretty good. So tonight we talked about white supremacy. We're in our last 5 minutes, and I gotta ask each one of you around this subject. We're voting, you guys, on November 8th, and we need to have some meaning attached to these votes, and we need to probably do it collectively. If not in this next election, certainly in 2024. So I'm going to start out with you, Mona. So what is the ask?
My ask is always going to be reparation and police reform. I had the opportunity to go down to Deanna's Joseph's trial 2 days last week, and we got to do something with the police reform. It's just sad.
Yeah, I agree with that. You are very consistent with that, and it's obvious that is a major injustice
Sure.
for the Black community.
And for some kind of reason, they think we should be able to, as if we don't love our children, that we should just be able to move on.
Yeah.
Accept the fact that it was, they said, an accident.
Because it's been the pattern over 400 years, we have just moved on, and they're expecting.
We don't hurt. We don't have feelings.
Yeah, it stops now. Alton,
Yes.
what's up? What's the ask?
Oh, I would ask us to every day take another look at our relationship with institutions, political, business, what have you, and say, how can I change this relationship, starting with me and then maybe with groups or what have you, to my advantage? And it builds on Albert's point. How do I, I'll use position lightly, but how do I put myself in a position to create an alternative?
Yeah.
So that, so that when I engage this, I may engage it at a first shot, but I actually have a backup plan, or to the point where I don't have to engage this at all, where I'm actually running parallel to this. But I have to ask myself. So my ask is, again, people putting themselves in that mindset to say, what alternative can I create to this?
That's a tough one. And I think that's where we all are. What is the alternative to what we're experiencing or what we have experienced?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Albert, you suggested that we talk about white supremacy, and I'm going to tell you, I loved it.
Okay. Okay.
So
let me throw my ask in. I'm gonna use my favorite, one of my heroines, Ida B. Wells, said, "Let no Black person depend on no party in these political times but himself for his own salvation." Okay, so I'm back to that concept of it is time to break up the idea that there's only a two-party system. See, other countries have 3, 4, 5, 6 parties, and they all have to negotiate once again with the power. And so I'm saying it's time that there is some kind of forced way. We say no more of all these jumping through the hoops for a third or fourth party. We say no more can the Democrats and the Republicans dictate what the political system looks like. That's my ask.
Yeah, I think it's a strong ask. When people ask, and I am registered Democrat, but when people ask me, are you Democrat, Republican, what have you, and they assume Democrat, of course, I like to just say I'm Black. And I'm going to vote on Black issues pretty much. Martha has joined us tonight, you guys. I don't know if you've been reading the social, but she said,
I've been reading it, yes.
I agree, we need to think about ownership. What do we as a people control? What do we control? And at one time, Blacks had control of Black hair products. Who owns them now? And I think the reparations piece is necessary. But before we get to the reparations piece, that alternative, that thing that we need to come up with, that answer that brings us together, where we become this power group. I mean, the 30% or so that's controlling the Republican Party is not a whole lot of people, and yet they're wagging the dog. Black people have more power than we understand. And before we can get to that point where we are controlling and owning and saying, you know, you got electricity, I got water, let's negotiate. We have got to figure out what's our alternative. What is it that we could do that brings us together so that we become that powerful voting bloc in such a time as this? Hey,